Near the end of Splatoon 2, in preparation for Splatoon 3, Nintendo began reversing many of the changes in design philosophy seen with the launch in earlier years of Splatoon 2. Splatoon 3 was intended to be more similar to the original game instead of the failed design of the second, and part of this effort was modernizing old specials for the new game. The specials would always change upon the original, making them less about raw power and including different use cases to make them more versatile in different situations. For example, Inkzuko was left with only 3 shots instead of the countless in the original game, but the shots are now arced for hitting enemies in more angles than before. This adds more skill to using it and makes the weapon more fun to use, but it doesn't have the same raw displacement ability that it used to. However, unlike Inkzuka, its sister Inkstrike would get an objective downgrade. Its full range abilities were removed to only cover a small area, and the Inkstrike itself is far smaller and does minimal damage. While the player can now throw 3 Inkstrikes, this didn't make up for its nerfs. The original Inkstrike showed the enemy team where it was going to land before the strike actually landed to give them a chance to avoid it. This worked well because the team would have to be very quick. The Inkstrike was huge, and if action wasn't taken immediately, it would be too late. However, Triple Inkstrike is small enough that the warning indicator can be ignored for a short while, especially on dualies, making the weapon even less effective at displacement. Furthermore, upon the game's launch, Triple Inkstrike got placed on some terrible weapons. Splatbrella hardly functioned at that time and still barely functions today. Slosher is completely outshined by Sloshing Machine. The only decent weapon Triple Inkstrike was on was Rapid Blaster. Compounded with the poor abilities of the special, it went almost unused. Then, Triple Inkstrike got its chance. In the Chill Season 2022 update, the Tenatech Splattershot was released. This weapon sported Triple Inkstrike and the community went wild. They couldn't believe what Nintendo had done to the Tenatech, giving such an iconic weapon such a poor kit that would never be used. People were having trouble even imagining a bot that could successfully make Triple Inkstrike good. This is where version 2.1.0 comes along. This version increased the radius of the strike by 10% and increased damage by 50%. This is a major fix of the issue of being able to basically ignore the strike, and suddenly Triple Inkstrike found a ton of use. Competitive players immediately started picking up the Tenatech Splattershot when new comps were built around Triple Inkstrike in mind. Such a major buff was almost unheard of, and everybody scrambled to make the most of it. But after the initial shock, people began realizing something unfortunate about Triple Inkstrike. The buff just wasn't enough. The strike still covered a small area, and you still had to get up close and make yourself vulnerable to release the strike, unlike in Splatoon 1 where you could release the strike from a safe location using the minimap. Even worse, Booyah Bomb did exactly the same thing as Triple Inkstrike while being far better. It offered armor to protect the user, and the Booyah Bomb itself expands rapidly in a large area. Today, Triple Inkstrike stands as a special that is not actively sought out for, but acceptable on a kit if the sub and main weapons are good. It's unfortunate seeing one of the most fun and creative weapons in Splatoon 1 relegated to a second-rate position, but that's how the Triple Inkstrike ultimately ended up.